Yo, what's going on, Dragon Balls? Welcome back to another video. This time we're going to do something a little bit different, something new to the channel. This is going to be kind of like a DBS history lesson. And I think it's a kind of interesting video to do because there's a lot of different history to the game. I mean, we're just about 2 years old now, right? And there's been a lot of formats so far, a lot of different decks, even though there's been a short span of only about six sets with 3 side sets and about 2 years now. But there's a lot of DBS history and a lot of things that I find really interesting about the game, just looking at it kind of like retrospectively. And this is something I'm going to talk about that people still don't let me get over, but we're going to talk about it basically in its entirety, and it's going to be about Shenron Gogeta and why that deck was never tier 0, even though I, for one, and many other people claim that it would become a tier 0 deck. So before we get into this video, guys, if you're new to the channel, definitely hit the subscribe button. Make sure that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the awesome Dragon Ball Super content that I post here. If you're looking for a Dragon Ball Super community, check out the Discord in the description below. Excellent group of people, amazing place for new players. And finally, guys, if you're longtime fans of the channel, want to help support me, support the channel, and get some competitive content, check out the Patreon in the description below. Really helps the channel out. With that being said, we're going to get into this video. So this is going to talk about why the Shenron Gogeta deck was never tier 0. Now, if you're a newer player, if you never played around that time, I'll give you a brief rundown of what the Shenron Gogeta deck did. So it played the original Shenron leader, which I'll bring up on screen right now. Basically, you were going to abuse the ability of that Shenron leader to give something triple attack. And usually you wanted to use things that already had triple strike. So the main focus of the deck was around the Gogeta Hero Revive 7 drop. So very brief thing about it, 5 keyword skills basically, and when you do play it, sparking 10, your opponent has to shuffle their hand back into their deck and draw 3 random cards. You do have to crit a life for that ability. So this was the win condition of the deck. It was play this on 5 energy, give it triple attack, so you swing through 9 damage. Oftentimes you'd have Shenron Figure Majesty on the board, so you'd be able to give this guy critical as well, so your opponent would never get a new card and you would just OTK them. This was a very, very scary card since it came out, but it wasn't meta relevant at first because it did come out when Hirudegarn Storm was at its peak prime, right? And just real quick, the other win conditions of this deck, it didn't always have Gogeta 7 as a win condition. It played about 2 or 3 copies of this card, so you could play the Gogeta 5 drop to spin 2 cards back to the deck and draw 2. This is also another valid card to give triple attack in a pinch situation. And then the other card was At All Costs Vegeta, which would let you take 2 life to gain triple strike plus 3k for every energy you control, and KO battle cards, so you can get rid of like a pesky blocker. This is also a valid target that this deck could use to fuse into the Gogeta, because the Gogeta does have Union Patora, where you pitch a Vegeta and Goku from your hand at the same power level, so you can play the 20k vanilla Gokus, and you can play this At All Costs Vegeta, and it synergized really well with the deck. But yeah, like I said, this card was not very meta relevant when it first came out, because full power storm is basically still in effect, right? However, many players like myself were immediately not a fan of this card because there's no counterplay to it, there's no outplay. And this card came out in a time where Bandai was printing Deflect on a lot of cards. I mean, you see Height of Mastery down here. Height of Mastery is a very meta relevant card right now, where Gogeta 7 isn't as meta relevant, but we know that it has Deflect, right? They both share Deflect, and Deflect is a very non-interactive keyword skill. It's unaffected by counterplay. You can't Crusher Ball it, you can't Bloodlust it, you can't stop the effect in any way, shape, or form. And in the case of Gogeta Hero Revived, there is absolutely 0 outplay, right? So you can't do anything about it. You get a random hand, and you have to just pray that you can defend off what you may or may not get off your life, right? Because your opponent's going to probably potentially crit you for 9 damage. Where at least the Height of Mastery, there's some play around where you can hold your Awaken if you're on tap 2 leader. You can wait for them to height you down, then you can Awaken on tap 2 energy, and you can keep going. But yeah, in the case of Gogeta Hero Revived, immediately many players, including myself, were not fans of this card. We didn't like how non-interactive it was. However, this card came out in the peak of Hirudegarn Storm, so it was very, very not viable. Then we got the first major ban list of our game. So the first card banned in the game was the Super Saiyan 3 leader, if you guys do recall. But then a few months after that, we got our first major ban list. So quick recap of the ban list. We had the 3-drop Cell go to 1. We had a Unyielding Spirit Trunks go to 1, which is a key piece of the Hirudegarn Storm deck. Scrambling Assault Sun Goten down here got banned, and the Legendary Flute got banned, which at that point it was already at 1, so it wasn't a super key piece of the deck anymore. But that was basically a small recap of the ban list. So these cards got banned, and everyone was afraid that Storm was basically a dead deck, that aggro was dead. In essence, it just wasn't playable. I mean, with the removal of Flute, the red aggro decks that abuse the 1-drop attackers like Sand Cobb and Intensifying Power Trunks, they were basically unplayable already. And then Hirudegarn Storm basically took over. But now that Scrambling Assault Sun Goten was gone and that Unyielding Spirit Trunks was gone, many players were afraid that aggro was just not going to take over, and we were very, very afraid that mid-range was just going to dominate the game. And at the time there was no better mid-range bomb card than Gogeta Hero Revived. So at this point, let me tell you what the deck does, because whenever I try and describe this deck and what it is and what it does, I call it building a puzzle. And if you can build your puzzle successfully, you realistically should win the game. So this is how the Shenron Gogeta deck would play. So turn 1, maybe Crisis Crusher, maybe you just pass your turn. Turn 2, you ideally want to go for an objection, and each turn obviously you're searching Dragon Ball to try and awaken. You want to ideally awaken by turn 3 so you can get the most cards to your hand, because you'll search 2 every single turn that you do that. So turn 2, you want to hit objection, go to 3 energy. Turn 3, charge your 4th energy, and you're able to awaken at this point. Get a wish back from your drop area if you happen to use any in the earlier turns. Most likely you didn't, but you may have discarded one maybe off like 1-star ball if you chose to play it, things like that. So on turn 4, ideally the deck would be awakened, and you'd be able to usually hard cast a Figure of Majesty, which you'd use its ability to untap 2 energy, and then you could free World Peace another Figure of Majesty or any other utility card you needed at that point. But typically you're going to be setting up for your OTK turn. Typically you're going to be setting up for your 9-0 turn with your Gogeta or your Adult Class Vegeta. So it would be very optimal to go hard cast Figure of Majesty on 4 and free World Peace Figure of Majesty on 4 as well, so you can get untap all 4 energy. Or you could bring back some super combos. You have a lot of utility if you're able to do that, or you're able to bring back 2 Figure Majesties in the same turn. So on turn 5, you have your options of win conditions. You can go Auto Class Vegeta. This was more optimal if you didn't have the fusion pieces in hand, or if like you were at a very low life, or you needed more cards from your life to your hand. Stacking Senzu Bean on an Adult Class Vegeta that's going to swing 3 times is really, really busted. So a lot of times, no matter how big your opponent's hand would be, it'd be very, very hard for them to combo out of it. But ideally, you're going to go for Gogeta Hero Revive, because that was basically going to ensure you the win if you can get there on time. And a lot of players, like I said before, were very, very afraid that this deck would just take over and dominate because Storm was dead. However, come Atlantic City Pro Play Tour 2019, we found out that that was not quite the case. Shenron Gogeta was a deck that everyone was very, very afraid of going into, but that event showed that Storm was not dead. What happened was this leader right here, Broly the Awakened Threat, the brand new leader out of the Broly Pack 1. Once this leader came out, yeah, Storm had basically a breath of fresh air breathed into it. You were able to do some crazy aggressive plays, mostly because he was a yellow leader, so he synergized well with Shugesh. He synergized well with the main deck mono yellow package already. I know I played this deck for a very, very long time when it first came out, because I just hated that Shenron Gogeta deck and I wanted a hard counter it really, really bad. And the deck had a lot of great matchups otherwise. So the yellow Broly deck, what it was able to do was, like I said, use Shugesh, but also when you'd be able to guarantee Awaken on turn 2, because the unawakened side of this leader takes a life when it attacks and draws a card. So you got self-awakening there. And against the Shenron Gogeta matchup, if you could not awaken yourself to be aggressive against that matchup, you were probably going to lose in most decks that you chose to play. So it was very, very important that it had this ability. And in combination with Bardock the Progenitor, the 1-drop yellow, swap target, take a life when you play it, 10k attacker, you could put pressure on the Shenron Dragon Ball leader when it's unawakened, and you could get that turn to awaken. So what it would be is, like, if let's just say you went second with the Broly leader, you could get 3 attacks in. Let's say your leader attack, a Bardock the Progenitor attack, and at the time Goten was banned, so we would go into Dependable Dynasty Son Goku. So the deck wouldn't draw nearly as much, but the deck was still very, very aggressive. You know, 3 attacks turn 1 is very aggressive. So turn 2, you still play Bardock. You get down to 4 life. You can play Bardock twice and swap into as many Dependables as possible. Maybe your build played Videl, carrying Mother Videl. So once you got to that turn 2 awaken, you would leave the Bardock Progenitor on the board, attack with your leader, awaken, untap 2, and you'd be able to combo in the Bardock Ape on top. So then you'd be having another double strike swing. So you'd just be getting 3 attacks turn 1, as many as maybe 4, 5, 6 attacks turn 2, and your turns would just be insane. And you'd be so aggressive that you would actually be able to beat Shenron Gogeta, and in that sense, it did have a very hard counter. Very shortly after that, we had the introduction of Clash of Fates, which did introduce Borgos. However, luckily, the Broly Storm deck was not very affected by that card, because you didn't have Annealing Spirit Trunks anymore. You weren't playing blue for Senzu Bean. You weren't untapping a lot of energy. We also got the introduction of the Frieza swap deck, which is what I have here, the Final Showdown Frieza. So as early as turn 2, you were able to go into this Final Showdown Frieza, which was just a ginormous 25k double strike critical, and it was another very aggressive deck as well. It wasn't quite as aggressive as Broly Storm or the Storm package in general, but it was a very aggressive build nonetheless, because dropping a 25k double striker on turn 2, turn 3 was very powerful. And it was another deck that gave Shenron Gogeta a real run for its money. The issue with Shenron Gogeta was it tried to adapt and play yellow to kind of stave off the aggro. So we had like Battering Laser here and Flying Nimbus. These were 2 of the cards that the deck tried to incorporate, as well as some yellow Gokus and Vegetas just to charge for yellow energy. And the idea with that was that the deck would be able to play Nimbus to stall up until 5 energy, and that's only turn 4 for the Shenron Gogeta deck, because it just played Objection to get there 1 turn faster, right? So by introducing yellow, the deck tried to do that, but it just became a lot more clunky. The big issue with it was the deck would play Battering Laser so that it could just go blast through any negates, especially in the format where that was introduced. The introduction of free negates came into play. You had Dimension Magic, you had Shocking Death Ball, Power Burst, things of that nature. But the issue always came up to be you want to play Gogeta 7 on turn 5. And if they come into the Sparking Gate off the 3 cards, you might be in for some trouble, and your battering later is not going to be live, because if you tap out on 5 energy for Gogeta 7, you're not going to be able to, battering their threat, because you're not going to be able to energy to do it. So you could pull it off if you had the Adult Class Vegeta win con, but then your opponent got to keep their hand. So none of it was ever optimal. The thing was, like, the yellow build was never very optimal, because you had to put off your kill turn an additional turn, and that could make or break the game. Once you get to the turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, even back in this format, just about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, turn 4, turn 5 was still very, very crucial. Even turn 3 is very crucial if you're playing against aggro, and some decks couldn't afford it. The other big reason why the Shenron Gogeta deck never became tier 0 was because it was afraid of its own shadow. And what I mean by that was the mirror match for Shenron Gogeta was pretty much abysmal, because what you had was both players playing Shenron Figure of Majesty, of course, because it's one of the best cards to bring out with World Peace, and they would both loop Dende new to the jobs, because like I mentioned before, the Shenron Gogeta deck did abuse objection to get to that turn 5 a lot faster. So when you play Shenron Figure of Majesty, you're able to just bring out Dende new to the job every turn and activate main, pay 2, and you could get rid of one of your opponent's energy if they ramped in that game. So the mirror match is absolutely abysmal, and aggro was a very, very powerful deck. Now I will say Shenron Gogeta was still very present in the format, all the way from Pro Play Tour Atlantic City to ARG Las Vegas, which are 2 events that I did play in, basically the start and end of this format. Shenron Gogeta was a deck you had to watch out for. You couldn't really play a slower strategy, because if you did get paired up against Shenron Gogeta throughout that tournament, you were basically going to lose. If you couldn't win the game by turn 4, maybe turn 3 ideally, you were probably just going to die to Gogeta Hero Revive. There were a lot of slower decks in that format I wanted to mess around with, like Baby Vegeta, like Golden Frieza, Lemon Line Golden Frieza, but you really just couldn't mess with them because they were a bit too slow. The other thing that happened in that format, especially pretty much only at ARG Vegas, this is where that card was introduced, Son Goku Path to Greatness came out, and that gave you the ability to play Height of Mastery on turn 4. And of course, that's what we're all realizing right now is super busted with Super Shenron. This is not a Super Shenron complaining video, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But that card did come out in that tournament, and it basically gave the format another turn 4 automatic wing condition, where Gogeta 7 was a turn 4 automatic wing condition if you hit objection and everything went smoothly. But honestly, Path to Greatness into Height was a much easier, much more obtainable turn 4 automatic wing condition, because with the yellow Broly leader, your Head of Mastery would attack 3 times. You wouldn't rip your opponent's whole hand out, but you would be able to go for 3 triple strike swings with your opponent usually being tapped out on energy, and it required a very less specific hand. So the introduction of all these things are basically the reasons why Shenron Gogeta never became tier 0, even though many players like myself were afraid it would. And again, I admit this all the time. Whenever someone brings it up, I was super wrong about this card. And I'll say that I still think Gogeta 7 is a broken card, and I don't think there's any reason it should exist in this game, because for some cards like Gogeta 7, there's no reason for it to exist. It doesn't promote any type of interactive, fun, fair gameplay, right? And maybe that's not what everyone looks for in this game, but I think the majority of players do look for at least a fair shot at winning a game. No one wants to play against a deck that just has an auto win condition at a certain turn. It's not fun. It's not interactive. And what I will tie into Super Shenron really quickly is that the Shenron Gogeta deck was very, very, very linear. It really didn't do anything until turn 4, turn 5, until 4 energy, 5 energy, with the Shenron Figure of Majesties and with dropping your win condition on 5 energy. The Super Shenron deck has 1.5 million win conditions, whether it's Storm, Height of Mastery, Victory Strike, and I think that's another reason why that Super Shenron is a much more degenerate deck now than Shenron Gogeta ever was back in its prime. So, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that DBS history lesson. I know it was a different type of video today. Nonetheless, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys want more videos like this, let me know in the comments below. I've got a lot of different things I can talk about. Set 2 format with like Blue-Green Soul Striker, if you guys weren't around for that. Just one idea off the top of my head. But yeah, if you guys like this video, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.